Hey there, CrossFit Deliverance athletes. Let's go ahead and jump into the next installment of the Be Relentless vlog. Tomorrow's programming is going to be the second day of our gymnastics test week. We're going to be looking at strict or kipping ring dips, push-ups, or banded-assisted push-ups. Go ahead and ask your coach if you're unsure what a banded-assisted push-up is. They'll be able to walk you through what that should look like, guys. And of course, full range of motion through all the pressing movements are required, aka at the top of every press, the elbow is at full lockout, nothing that's in this semi-locked out position. The elbow should essentially disappear, right, into your arm. With the push-up, we're looking at nipples touch the ground, no riblets, right? And then for the dip, we want to make sure at the bottom position that the shoulder is below that horizontal plane that the top of the elbow creates. So guys, that's the standard. Pretty simple. Good luck and all the best. For the rest of the day, we're going to be working on hang squat snatch, working on cycling from the high hang. Because the workout is going to be 4 rounds, 400-meter run, and then it's going to be 10 hang squat snatch, right? What we're looking for, the intent of the workout, is that you should be scaling the weight as such to where this hang squat snatch should still be sharp, right? I might not be cycling from the hang, but there should be 0 pauses anywhere in the hang position. And then what we're looking for is the finish into the turnover down to the bottom of our squat is sharp. It's quick. There's no stutter in finding your balance. Every other rep should be a weight that you can stay in control, and it should be quick. In terms of the turnover, cycling the reps per se does not have to be fast, but in terms of the finish to the turnover, it needs to be very sharp and quick. Ask your coach if you're unsure of what that means. They'll be able to give you direction. If you want a little heavier weight because you're feeling really easy, it's sharp at 95, 65 pound, RX Plus is going to be 135 and 190 at 135. 95 pounds, respectively, for guys and girls. No accessory work for tomorrow because you're going to be spending a lot of time going and prepping for the tests and then into the workout. Mobility is going to be making sure the pec is as loose as possible. Make sure it's not all balled up and tight, causing the shoulder to roll forward into this internally rotate position, because then the pec is forced to try to stabilize the shoulder and press, right? So we want to make sure it's loose, the shoulder is able to drop down in the position we need it to during all the pressing. And then, of course, opening up the hips for the hang squat snatch. For stabilization, again, we talked about loosening up the pec, but we need to turn on the lat, so if the pec is loose, the lat is on and helping you to keep the shoulder in position to make sure, again, the pec is only worrying about pressing, really helping you press and not having to do 100% of the stabilization of keeping the shoulder in a safe position. And of course, guys, other stabilization, glutes, squatting, hinging, anything that really you're thinking, okay, this involves the lower body a little bit, you should always go ahead and try to turn the glutes, wake them up a little bit. Behind the scenes, guys, Amy and I are still working to go ahead in June, implement all the items that we put out in the last gym update #1, and at the same time, we're working on all the items that we're going to be looking to go ahead and implement on gym update #2, which will be somewhere between July and probably August, September. So we're excited about those items that we're working on as well. No events for the rest of the month of May other than the second Frosty Friday, right? So not this Friday, but the Friday afterwards. So go ahead and just settle in, focus on your gymnastics, enjoy the sun, right? Another beautiful day. So go ahead and get some vitamin D. It's much needed. And then, guys, let's take a second and talk about hand care. We are going into a gymnastic cycle, right? And hand care really just is really a fancy term to make sure your calluses are healthy. Guys, let's define a healthy callus. A healthy callus is a hydrated and a thin callus. Let's go ahead, let's define thin. Thin is to where you should be able to touch a callus and you should be able to move it around, and it doesn't feel like there's this gigantic, like, bolted on piece of skin on your hand, right? It's still, it's not acting independently if you go ahead and start to shift your skin around and so on and so forth. It should be moving with your skin. It should not be just kind of a static position. If it is, it means you gotta shave it down. So it should be thin and hydrated. Let's go ahead and let's talk about it being hydrated. Hydrated is just essentially making sure that if you have hand lotion, you're applying that to your hands to make sure they aren't cracked and brittle. You also want ahead, I know it's really hard for medical professionals, you want to make sure you try to If you're in a consistent space where you feel like you have to Perel, either because of your job and use hand sanitizer, make sure, right, that you are counteracting all that essentially alcohol that's drying up your skin with some sort of moisturizer, right? If you're like, coach, I really don't have a hard time with my hands ever being dry, then we need to talk about your callus being too thick, right? So if it's too thick, what's going to happen is going to kind of essentially become like its own little structure. It's going to create a hard edge, or something to where it's a hard edge enough to where when you're doing pull-up work, toes to bar, anything with a gymnastics bar, kettlebell, or a barbell, that implement can catch a corner or edge of it and then rip it off. And that's how hand tears occur, and they tear off a callus. So we need to make sure they're as low as possible. I like to go ahead and use these guys. These are super cheap. They're only between like $2 to $5 at any essentially like pharmacy, drugstore, so on and so forth. The nice thing about these, you can't overdo it with these. If you go ahead, for example, I have 0 callus on my palm here. I'm just gonna go ham, right? Just rub, go for it, right? I go ahead, show you. Awesome, right? Really all it felt was like a small little tickle, right? Not a big deal. So that way, if you start to grind through a callus, you shouldn't have to worry about going actually through it and being like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna grind through my skin. So and so, for those of you who have never done this before, like, it's okay, right? Get that callus as thin as possible. Now, if you're like, hey, I'm good with keeping my calluses thin, but I still rip, you probably have overly dry hands, right? And overly dry hands doesn't mean that outside the gym you have dry hands, but could mean that you're overusing chalk, right? If you find that you have thin calluses, you believe that you're going ahead, you're keeping them relatively thin, but you're still ripping them quite often, then I challenge you to go ahead and kind of look back at how much you're actually using chalk. So what you're doing is, in the moment, you're essentially overdoing chalk and you're drying your hands out, and then your calluses have no chance of staying supple and malleable to the bar. Guys, so if you have any further questions about hand care, go ahead and ask a coach or myself. And remember, always be relentless in everything that you do. Have a good one.